Grease is the quintessential high school musical. It has everything: love, danger, villains, bullies, and cliques. But the new series on Paramount Plus is bringing more than just high notes and harmony to the screen. Grease: Rise of the Pink Ladies brings representation. I spoke with non-binary actor Ari Notartomaso, who plays a tomboy and queer character on the screen. I really wanted to kind of start with a little background about you, and I'd love to know where your love of musical theater began.
Yeah, I grew up sort of like when I was really, really small, I grew up in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
small town in Pennsylvania, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area, like The
Oh,
Office.
yeah, I know that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when I was really small, I was very very outgoing. I was like the kind of kid to like run up to people in the restaurant and like want to make friends. So when I was 6 years old, my dad encouraged me to join a local theater group.
Mm.
And he was kind of scared that I wasn't gonna like it because there's the director of the program is this sort of like harsh woman. She's a butch lesbian. She has tattoos, like piercings all over her body. And he was sort of waiting for me to come out and be like, yeah, it was like scary. Like there's this like, this really strong personality and like it's a huge group of people. Like, but I came out and it was like, I walked out of our first rehearsal and said it was like the best day of my life. And of course, and there's many reasons for that. Like that was probably the first butch lesbian I had ever seen in my entire life.
So
Uh,
to go with the theme, it was sort of a Ring of Keys moment.
it was a ring of keys moment. It was certainly a ring of keys. It was also like a leather jacket, like, piercings, like it was just it was ring of keys and more. Um and I kind of like lost I just kind of I lost all fear of performing because I felt like I was sort of like amongst people that I could I just like I didn't know why I was so obsessed with her. Like but I do feel like she's part of why her name's Lee, and her like presence and like me being sort of like really interested in just like who she is and how she is and not understanding why, I think is sort of the beginning. It was my way into theater, and then it took me a long time to really identify that within myself. Like I started dressing and came out as butch when I was like 22 or 20, like within like the last 2 years.
I kind of wanted to just stick with a little bit of background and talk about musical theater for a moment, because I think there's more and more AFAB queer characters happening in musical theater, but for a long time there weren't. So I wonder if you might share any kind of moment where you felt seen by characters in musical theater.
Such a good question, or like thing to talk about. Yeah, it's so funny. I like didn't really all throughout college, I sort of had pigeoned myself in the like I'm a pretty musical theater girl. I like dyed my hair blonde. I grew it out to my shoulders. I was wearing jewel tone dresses. Like I sort of like felt that was I know there's some pretty shocking pictures like they did on my camera. Um and I played the part really well. Like I learned really quickly that it was what got me the most amount of attention and like what gave me the most amount of like time on stage was to sort of show and share myself in this way. Um, and it's not to say that it was a lie, but it certainly wasn't fully honest. Like I was sort of hiding, and I never had seen um much specifically like lesbian representation in musicals. It's sort of like something that we have Fun Home,
Right.
and and the prom,
Yeah.
and there are of course like other sapphic characters in musical theater, definitely like lesbian and bisexual women who are playing in musical theater, but
Sure.
it's very often that we see a story that's centered around um lesbians and lesbianism and like and queerness, that and being gay in a way that's not like like men being gay.
I want to turn to Rise of the Pink Ladies. I was really struck by
how this show is just, it's fun, but it's also really intellectually astute, because it takes so much of the 1970s film, which I adored as a child, and it fixes some of the problems, like the problem of what is a nice guy, what is a good guy, the problem of the, you know, women as virgins or sluts, and Sandy, in order to belong, has to fundamentally change herself. And Rise of the Pink Ladies just flips all of that on its head. Would you talk a little bit about what it means to you to be a part of this retelling of a story that so many people are familiar with, or repositioning, I should say?
That's a great way of putting it. I love that word, repositioning. It's obviously like a dream come true. Like everyone sort of has grown up watching Grease, or like it's like it's in the air that we breathe, it's the water we drink, you know, like it's sort of all around us. And when I watched Grease as a young person and like growing up and stuff, like I always kind of felt like, oh, I wish we could see what was happening, like I want to hear more about Eugene. Like I feel like Eugene obviously isn't like a named queer character, but like is this huge nerd. I lovingly call Grease 2 the Revenge of Eugene, because he finally like to kind of stand up to the T-Birds and their bullying and stuff.
Right.
And I kind of like, you know, watching it, I was like, why do I love Eugene so much? And it's like, oh, because I was bullied, because I grew up and didn't really belong to, you know, belong in the groups that were popular. I was never a popular kid. And now, like, to be able to be amongst a cast, like an incredibly diverse cast, and, you know, be amongst my friends who all have marginalized identities, that they identify with, and like, you know, their worldview is like, you know, very different than mine. And for us to sort of go back in time and spend a little bit more time in the 50s, like obviously is a little bit scary, but thankfully we, you know, it is a musical, like you said, like it's like a really fun, beautiful, expressive, adventurous world. Like the cars fly, people fly, you know, like it is like, it's a really kind of safe, I think, world to sort of go back. And for us, like as cast members, like we walk into the 1950s and then we cut, you know, then we cut and we're suddenly back in the 2023s where like we all have, you know, equal rights in some capacity, and like, you know, we're sort of like in a safe place to kind of look at that, which I think is obviously very important for our own like safety as human beings. So it's sort of been to me like a really awesome way to look at our history and like find the stories that we haven't been able to tell, that for people, and stories that have existed and did exist in the 1950s, and then also to be able to play a character like Cynthia, who would have been called a tomboy in the 1950s, and certainly doesn't have much language for, you know, as much as language as we do now in order to sort of like ascribe gender and sexuality.
Thank you so much to Ari for that conversation. You can watch more of our chat on Advocate Channel's YouTube page. Thanks for watching. I am Tracy E. Gilchrist.